As AI rapidly reshapes industries, a new report shows that healthcare leaders are racing to keep up. Over the past 6 months, Define Ventures, a digital health VC firm, spoke with C-suite leaders across pharma, tech, and enterprise healthcare to understand how AI is being applied across these industries. I'm joined now by Define Ventures founder and managing partner Lynne Chou O'Keefe. Welcome, Lynne.
Thank you so much for having me.
Lynne, in what ways is AI being used in pharma?
Yeah, it's incredible. Obviously, this is a tectonic shift for the industry in so many ways. And like we see with providers or even pharma companies, the use cases that we see are taking things such as scribing, which is if you were in a doctor's office, uh, a doctor afterwards would want to take medical notes and then capture that information after a patient visit. We're seeing the same thing in the pharma industry as well. One of the top use cases in AI is what we call medical writing. And so really documenting all the data from the clinical trials, et cetera, and translating that into the systems that they need to. So we really see parallels between providers and what we're seeing in AI there, and even pharma companies as well, in terms of the first initial use cases for AI.
Lynne, in your report, you said that pharma's AI future is going to be defined in the next 12 to 24 months. What does that look like in implementation?
Absolutely. I think we see it across the value chain of pharma when we think of R&D, not only how we think about using data for drug discovery, but just how do we help labs and scientific discovery be more efficient with what we're seeing with NIH funding dropping, as well as the pressures of the Inflation Reduction Act. It's really important. Time to market, time to discovery needs to shorten. So we see that in R&D. We think about clinical operations. So once a trial is now initiated, phase one, phase two, phase three, how do we select sites quicker? How do we make clinical sites more efficient so that these drugs can be studied in a shorter amount of time? And then we think we'll also see this in commercialization, and truly the ability for AI to have a more personalized experience, that pharma really reinvents their relationships with patients as they take these therapeutic drugs and get data back from these patients and really be able to educate patients going forward.
How long does it typically bring to take a drug to market? And, do you think AI can reduce the amount of time it takes?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can talk many, many years. Now, it obviously depends on the therapeutic asset we're talking about. But I would say, typically, 5, 7 years from like very initial stages out to go to market launch. And we know the price of drugs to take it from discovery into commercialization is, $2 to $3 billion to do that. So it's quite about, time and investment that these pharma companies need to have. It really depends on the area of AI that we're talking about, but I think substantial increases to operational efficiencies for pharma companies and how they bring drugs to market, both in R&D and clinical operations, I think are some of the greatest gains that can be had for the industry.
Lynne, according to your report, only about 30% of pharma still plan to build AI in-house. 40%, it found, are mixing internal development with external partnerships, and another 30% is going to external first. So what prompted such a rapid shift from building internally to buying?
Yeah, I think it's when I talked about the macro, when I talked about also the fact that the clock speed of this industry, and I think a recognition that this is a very different technology than we've seen in years past in terms of how can we personalize to patients, how can we also understand more from the data. And I think we're seeing some really rapid shifts in certain therapeutic areas of pharma where they really have to rethink their strategy, and AI can be, I think, an enabler in that. I'll give you an example: GLP-1s and the advent of this drug. We've only scratched the surface, I believe, not only in cardiometabolic, but I think there are going to be other indications for that drug in the future And we've seen value chains shift because of that drug, as we've seen what's happened with Lilly Direct. And so when you have all of these macro things happening, I think the ability to stay out in front, use the capability sets of data, but recognize the changing landscape, that partnership is really going forward. And I think pharma has prepared itself and is one of the most advanced in AI versus all the ecosystem players in healthcare to really capitalize on this.
Lynn, do you see big tech offerings complementing or competing head on with these startups in pharma AI? And how should startups differentiate to win these enterprise deals?
Yeah, I think historically, when we look at NVIDIA or Amazon or others, there absolutely have been more big tech partnerships in life sciences and pharma versus, let's say, payer and providers in the healthcare ecosystem. And again, I think this is pharma's heritage of data, therefore, cloud compute. And have the capability set to have these large data sets has always been a real differentiator for pharma in the beginning. So it's not surprising these tech firms have partnered with pharma. How startups should think about it, though, is like where that innovation is happening in the stack. So we have a framework in our report that the first layer, if you will, is GPU compute, like NVIDIA. And the top layer, if you will, we call it layer 6, is the application layer. And we find that the big tech companies are really playing at the GPU compute as well as cloud compute and the LLM layer, right? And that's where those partnerships are happening. And then where startups really can differentiate and come in is at the application layer, because these startups can really create verticalized solutions that understand workflow and integrations beyond what big tech can do. And I think big tech really has to serve a real horizontal play in the market. They have to serve not only pharma, but payers, providers, fintech, consumer. There's a lot of verticals. And so I think startups can really differentiate on that application layer with their knowledge of the verticalization of what they do.
Lynne Chou from Define Ventures, thank you so much for joining us at the New York Stock Exchange.
Appreciate the time.